Welcome to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studios. We continue to celebrate all the amazing people across the state of Mississippi who are working to make this such a great place to live, work, and play. I've got another column up at SuperTalk.fm. I'll share it in the next couple of days, but I really want to encourage you to go to SuperTalk.fm and look under opinions. And the headline on this one is that coastal Mississippi's economic future is bright. Let's diversify. And I want to just share a couple of key numbers from this with you. And then, again, I'll share the full column in the next couple of days. But one of the things that I make the case is that a lot of our eggs are in the baskets of the government and gaming. So government contracts and military, and then gaming. Let me share a couple of really quick numbers with you. Gaming will do about $1.6 billion annually in coastal Mississippi. Think about that for a minute. That is a tremendous impact. About 9,000 direct jobs and another 18,000 jobs that I refer to as the ripple effect. So these are support businesses and others that are part of the economic engine that is the casino industry. Ingalls Shipbuilding employs around 11,000 people building warships. And then in terms of other impacts, I've heard a bunch of different numbers and read a bunch of different numbers quoted, but I stuck with around 15,000 or so indirect jobs that are associated with the ripple impact. Stennis Space Center over in Hancock County, Pearl River County, essentially 5,000 high-paid jobs. And I call those smart people because they're literally involved in testing rockets and more other critical things that are part of what we call this federal city that is Stennis Space Center. And then you add another 4,500 that are tied to the ripple effect. And then, like, if you just look at Keesler Air Force Base and the Naval Construction Battalion Center, we call the CB base, they have an impact of over $1 billion annually, and both direct and indirect jobs, 25,000 people. Think about that, and think about how much of what I just said is tied to the government. Bollinger last week announced a $951 million contract to build the new polar security cutters. These are the icebreakers that we've heard in the news today, and we're beginning to understand how that plays into America's defense and why that's going to be so important. So Bollinger is blowing and going, and it's great to see that. And so I go into some detail about all of that and why it's important for us to be thinking about what is that next thing going to be? What's the next gaming? What's the next Ingalls? What's the next, or maybe I should say shipbuilding. What's the next Stennis Space Center that's going to diversify the economy of coastal Mississippi? And I can't help but think back at my conversations with Joe Max Higgins from the Golden Triangle Development Link, has had so much success up there, when he said of coastal Mississippi that when you add it all together, the port, the highways, the rail, the quality of life, the full package, it would be hard to compete against us if we could ever put it together into one coastal Mississippi regional package. And what I have strongly urged our leaders to consider is a coastal Mississippi regional alliance. So it would be an economic development alliance, and it wouldn't affect the current economic development organizations. They would maintain their existing charters, but on the big deals that we would pursue together and that we would respond to about the possibilities of locating here, we would do so with one voice, and we'd have one single organization that would do that. And I've written a lot about it. I will continue to write a lot about it because I think we're at a point 20 years after Hurricane Katrina that we can start to kind of move away from our story being one of a survivor and one of really a thriving economic engine for coastal Mississippi. And we're doing really well economically. No one says we're not. The coastal Mississippi economic development organizations are doing a really, really good job. They've all been on the show. They will continue to be on the show. I think what they do is terrific. I'm just saying it's time for us to take it to the next level. And I believe this is one way we can do it. And we'll continue to have conversations about it as we go forward. That's going to be kind of a theme of this show going forward. But I'll share that column in the next couple of days, and we'll keep the conversation going. So let's shift gears now. I wanted to invite Christina Dent, who's the founder and president of End It for Good, back on the show. We've had numerous conversations. In fact, the last time she was on the show, we talked specifically about this legislative session, and she's involved in addiction recovery and various and different pathways for addiction recovery. And I think anytime we can have a conversation about addiction recovery, it's a good thing, because a lot of people, some people listening to the show are having issues with addiction, and some certainly know someone who is having issues with addiction. So anytime we can have a conversation about it, I think it's good to focus, and maybe you can find a way to help someone, or maybe you can find your own redemption in some of these conversations. So without any further ado, let me, say welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show to Christina Dent. Christina, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me back again.
Yeah, so for people who are watching on SuperTalk TV or Facebook or YouTube, you can see that she's very professional. She's got great mic and wonderful camera. She does this, and she's a terrific communicator. And that's one of the reasons I like to have her on the show. So, Christina, why don't we start with this? Let's remind people what End It for Good Mississippi is all about.
Yep. So we advocate and invite people to consider approaches to drugs that prioritize life, preserve families, and promote public safety. We believe we can do all of those things. You don't have to give up public safety in order to get people the help that they need, and vice versa. So we believe that we can approach drugs and addiction in a way that actually benefits everyone, not just the person using substances, but also their family and the broader community who's not using as well. And we believe a big part of that is shifting towards a health-centered approach to drugs and addiction rather than such a heavy focus on just a criminal justice approach that has not given us the results that we have been looking for.
Yeah, it's really interesting. You go back and look at the history of that. I had a pain intervention physician on the show last Wednesday as part of the Singing River Health Talk, and we talked a lot about the very advanced procedures that they're using to help people get away from using opioids and things like that long term. But we're learning more. I mean, one of the things that he and I talked about was the fact that that patients come to the table today much more aware. Let's say, for example, they've been on opioids, they're off, they don't want to get on them again, and they're trying to figure out what they can do about that. Or maybe they're on opioids and they want to get off, and they're trying to figure out what they can do about it. But what's happening is I keep wanting to say parents, but patients are coming to the table today wanting to have a better understanding of what their possibilities are, because we've learned so much about opioid addiction. And man, it was a free-for-all for too long. And now we're in a position where we're trying to say, okay, wait a minute. Now that we know what we know, let's don't go back there again. This is a conversation you have a lot, isn't it?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are more aware of what's happening. And part of that is just our greater awareness around mental health in general and risk factors. And we now know that this is not the stigmatized bad person thing that it kind of was for so many years, where, everything had to be hidden. There's still a lot of pressure to keep something like addiction hidden. But there's much more understanding of the fact that this is a health condition that people are dealing with, and they need help for that. And because almost every family is now impacted by it, I think people have seen that up close, and they're looking for other options. And so I think for a lot of us, especially here in Mississippi, we've been told really that there's one way that you can get sober, and that is through AA. AA is a wonderful tool, but the vast majority of people, about 90% of people who try it, will relapse. So we need to be open to, and there's a lot of really exciting things that are on the horizon that could help more people find a pathway to that thriving life that we all want people to have.
And in fact, we'll get into some of that before we get done with today's show. You wrote a book. Tell me about your book.
Yeah, it's called Curious, and it is my journey as a born and raised Mississippian. I've lived in the Jackson area my whole life, grew up in a wonderful Christian conservative home, and it's kind of my journey on this issue of what I learned about that growing up in the 80s and 90s about drugs and addiction, the pathway of becoming a foster parent that exposed me some different ideas and to people who were struggling, and really helped me come face to face with the human element of addiction. And then the journey of learning and changing my mind about how we approach it, and realizing that cracking down is never going to get us the outcomes that we want, because for a variety of reasons, cracking down on the market just pushes it underground and increases crime, makes the substances contaminated, and ultimately ends up destabilizing people's lives and families instead of really helping them to recover. And so I started End It for Good and ended up writing the book just as a way to invite other people into that conversation, because I think all of us want the same things. We want fewer people harmed. We want fewer people addicted. We want fewer children growing up with parents who are not present in their life because they're struggling with an addiction. Fewer people dying of overdose. I think no matter if we disagree on the solutions that get us there, all of us want that outcome. And so if we can start from that point and then begin looking at root causes of the harm, then we're going to find some better solutions.
We're visiting with Christina Dent, someone I enjoy spending time with. She's the founder and president of End It for Good. When we come back on the other side, we'll continue the conversation. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show. We're visiting with Christina Dent, who is the founder and president of End It for Good. We were talking about her book, Curious. It's really about her own journey to understand, ultimately, pathways for addiction recovery. There's a lot to talk about, but, last time you and I visited, we talked a lot about the legislative session. When you look back on this session, are there frustrations? Are there successes? How do you look at this legislative session?
Yeah, I think there are successes and frustrations. That's probably true for anyone that was involved in any issue. You want everything you want, but you don't always get that. But I think we've ended up with some good legislation on Kratom. We talked a lot about Kratom last time I was on the show. And interestingly enough, for this pain management conversation, that's what a lot of people use it for, as a way to either stop taking opioids or not use them in the first place, using something that's a natural botanical for that. And so I think we're in a good place with it is still available in Mississippi. It will be age regulated to 21 plus, behind a counter. Those are good regulations to have on something. We don't need 14-year-olds using Kratom. So that's a really good thing. That's good for public health.
Let's remind people about that. People who didn't hear the conversation. Kratom came out of nowhere and got super popular really quick, and it was widely available. Tell us first, what is it? And then what the legislature did to kind of tamp it down some.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it is a tree that's in the coffee family. The tree grows in Southeast Asia natively. And you can take the leaf of that tree and dry it out and powder it and put it in little capsules, or you can make a tea out of it. And people use that for a variety of things. It's a mild stimulant when you use the natural leaf variety. And it also can bind to your opioid receptors. It's not an opioid, but it is it can bind to those receptors, so it helps people with withdrawal symptoms if they want to stop taking opioids. And a lot of people are using it for other things. My goodness, I have heard from people who use it for back pain, for trigeminal neuralgia, a really painful facial condition, for fibromyalgia, all kinds of stuff. One man for arthritis. This is just a great story, Ricky. I talked with him on the phone, and he said, I had arthritis so severely from working in construction and working at a manufacturing plant that I could not button my shirts. I could not put shoes on. I could not button pants or buckle a belt. And so he had to wear Velcro shoes and elastic pants. His wife buttoned his shirts. He had to put them on over, just pull his button-down shirts over his head. And he said it was so bad, I couldn't do anything. And he's only in his 60s, but he said his doctor said he had the hands of an 80-year-old just because of working with them. And he started taking Kratom, and he is now back to, this is just natural leaf Kratom. And that's all that he changed. And he's now back to being able to drive. He can feed himself. He can wear all of regular clothes, regular shoes. He works part-time now in his retirement. And it's just this really amazing story. Now, he says, I'm the head deacon in my church, my Southern Baptist church. I'm not doing anything bad here. I'm just taking a natural botanical supplement for my health. And that's all I want to do. I don't want to do anything crazy with it. So I think we need to think about, like you said, how many people are using this? Estimates are that about 9% of Americans use kratom now, which if you've never heard of it, that sounds crazy. Like, what in the heck? How is 10% of the population using something I've never heard of? But for Mississippi, that means there's about 200,000 people in Mississippi who are using it. So anything we do with kratom, we need to be really careful, because you've got 200,000 people who are going to be impacted by whatever that legislation is. We want to be sure we take care of children and we don't allow them to have access of it. But we also want to be sure that the people who are using it for their health don't suddenly lose access and they're back to, what are they going to do? Suddenly go get on opioids or something like that. We need to be really careful when we're dealing with people's health and wellness, especially around pain management and things like that, that for those of us who have not lived with it, we don't know what it's like to live in pain every moment of the day, and need to be really careful. We got a lot of hardworking Mississippians like that man that work with their bodies. They're not sitting at a desk all day. They are putting their physical body on the line to provide for their families, and they have a lot of health conditions. They don't always have insurance to be able to go to the doctor and go get, prescriptions and surgeries and things, and this is giving them another option.
Christina, I'm curious because it's interesting. Mississippi is a conservative state for the most part. So when you hear something like kratom getting out of hand and being widely used and over the counter, easy to get to, and a lot of people using it and some that shouldn't be. It's a kind of a natural reflex in Mississippi to try to shut it down. This can't be good. This is somebody's making a quick buck. We shouldn't do this. People getting high, whatever people are saying. What is it? How is it that it gets on your radar screen, and when does it get on your radar screen? Like, did you know way early on that this was an evolving thing that was actually helping people, but also could be misused? How did it get on your radar screen? And then ultimately, what role did you play in sort of setting the record straight legislatively to help people understand? Whoa, let's don't overreact to this. Let's sort through fact from fiction so we can really do what's best for the people, the 200,000 or so that you mentioned who were on it. Tell me about the process of your engagement.
Yeah, I've known about it for about 5 years, and there's been various pushes at the state and federal level to either regulate it or ban it, or lots of different, fighting around what should happen with kratom. I did not realize how many people are using it medically until much more recently. That's been a really interesting thing. I've met lots of them now who've told me their personal stories as part of this kind of work we've been doing to help elevate those voices so that legislators can know some of the faces behind the legislation that they're considering on kratom. Because you're right, we do tend to only hear extreme stories, and the ones that frighten us are the ones that stick with us the most. And so anytime a new substance is on our radar, if we hear anything about potential harm, our knee-jerk reaction, this is collectively American for 100 years. Knee-jerk reaction is we should ban it. And we got to think about, let's follow that path. What's going to happen if we ban it? Well, we've got 200,000 people using it. That's a whole lot of consumers that someone is going to sell kratom to. So if we don't allow that to be sold in a regulated environment, the underground market's going to take that up, and we're now going to have people using contaminated kratom that, it's going to have fentanyl in it or whatever else the underground market might want to put in it. And all of that money is going to be going into criminal enterprises rather than being taxed and able to, go into the state budget. So just because we don't like something doesn't mean we should ban it. Just because there's potential for harm doesn't mean that we should ban it. Because sending something into an unregulated Wild West underground is not the way to keep people healthier. And we also don't want it to be in a Wild West legal environment, which is kind of where it has been. It's been new. So we see it as really this incredible opportunity. We have a new substance that people want to use. We can handle it a different way, and we can shift away from this history of banning things that send them to an underground market, and it's incredibly harmful. And instead, let's regulate them. Let's try to educate people about them, keep kids safe from them, and allow adults to access a quality controlled product if that's what they want. And so that's what we've been working on the legislative front, just really trying to educate legislators and help them to make the connection between a piece of legislation on something they may never have heard of and the real people who are going to be impacted by that.
Well, it's interesting because, I mean, there's a lot there. Probably these days, I'm just thinking as a grandfather and, knowing people who have kids who are in school or headed to college and whatever, one bad decision, you and I have talked about this before, but one bad decision and you get some underground drug that's laced with fentanyl, and suddenly you have a child that's no longer with us, or really, in the hospital with some really, really critical challenges. That's scary as heck, man. So you think about something like kratom being pushed into the underground and the potential of something like fentanyl becoming part of the conversation. That's scary. But even, more on a more lighter tone, it's just simply getting a level of kratom that's not crap, and it may not be laced with anything except junk or crap that makes it less pure. Part of the problem with supplements in general is this whole notion of not being FDA regulated. So how do you deal with that?
Well, I kind of think of it in terms of layers of knowledge that consumers might have. So you have the most knowledge about something that is a highly regulated prescription or highly regulated, in a hospital setting. And then you have these other layers of knowledge. You buy alcohol from the liquor store and the proof of it. Now, has it gone through the same kind of rigorous testing as, the anesthesia that the anesthesiologist is giving you at the hospital? Probably not, because it's not quite as risky. And so we can know what is in products by requiring that there be labeling that is appropriate and that there be testing that is appropriate and all of those things. And that's as those markets become, as they come into regulation, those are things that you kind of figure out over the course of a couple of years of, okay, this is what the problem is now. And so we don't want just Wild West gas station kratom with whatever in the package, but we do want people to access what is
fascinating conversation. When we get back on the other side with Christina Dent, we'll continue that part of the conversation. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. We're visiting with Christina Dent, the founder and president of End It for Good in Mississippi, and she's a regular on this show. And today we ended up getting off on a pretty significant conversation about kratom because it is a hot topic, and we're pre-recording this show for Monday, so there's most likely going to be some legislative outcomes. But I'm thinking about what you and I were talking about before we went to the break, and that is just this notion of how do you know purity? How do you know that it's been tested? This is something that I'm sure the legislature has to tackle as well, right?
Yeah. And it's also something that for a lot of Mississippi consumers, that they have figured out ways to make sure that they're getting something that is quality controlled. So I was talking to a person who owns a shop where they sell kratom and here in Mississippi, and they said every bit of kratom that I get has already been tested, and I send it out for another round of testing, and they send a detailed listing of everything that's in it, what's the percentage that's in it, and because for them, it's really important that they are known for selling high quality products that are not contaminated, that do have the amount of kratom in it that they're saying that it does. And so those are things that reputable vendors are providing to their customers, testing of the particular batch that they're buying the kratom of. And those are good things. Those are things that we have for lots of other products that consumers want. And that's something that consumers should know is available. And if they go to a store to buy kratom and the person says, oh, just trust me, it's tested, you might want to think twice about that and go find a vendor that is going to prove to you that it is tested. And so some of those testing requirements are things that we'll have to work out into the future. But it's a really positive thing that we are going to have protected access for adults. I just got a text this morning from a woman who has fibromyalgia and was barely able to hold a part-time job, was on the verge of just going on disability from lots of health problems, and has been taking kratom. She works full-time now. She works 6 days a week and is providing for her family. And so that is something we got to be really careful of. And she texted me this morning and she said, Can you just tell me, are you sure that we won't have a ban on it? Like, am I protected? Am I going to be arrested if I continue to use this? And so, that's the concerns of real people. And in legislation, it's often difficult to keep those faces in front of you. And they are real faces of real hardworking Mississippians. And we need to protect people from the harm of the Wild West without keeping them from something that is improving their quality of life and their ability to contribute and to provide for their families.
Hey, Christina, I was curious about this. Is kratom addiction a thing? Is it possible? And, how do you talk about that?
Yeah, so you can become dependent on it. You can become dependent on caffeine. You can become dependent on all sorts of things. Insulin. There's lots of medications you can become dependent on, and lots of substances, alcohol, tobacco, lots of things. And kratom is the same way. So people need to do their research to figure out if this is something that they want to take. Some of the people that I've talked with that have taken it for years have said part of what they do is switch out the varieties of kratom that they're taking, and that can help with some of those the ways that your body is processing it. But it's really important to distinguish between addiction and dependence. So we don't ever say someone's addicted to their insulin, even though their body is dependent on it. Yeah. There are lots of ways that you can be dependent on something, meaning your body will have a reaction if you stop taking it. But it's not an addiction. It's not negatively impacting your life. And that's what addiction is, negative impact, and you continue to engage in that activity in spite of negative impact, and that it's actually making your life worse. That's what we don't want. There are lots of people out there who are using kratom. I was actually just at a funeral a couple of weeks ago, and my piano teacher from when I was like 8 came up to me. I haven't seen her since I was about 8. And she said, hey, I just was kind of, wondering what you're doing now. And I told her I'd been working on kratom. And she said, that's so interesting because my son is a nurse and he takes kratom and has for a number of years for some health condition that he has. So it's really interesting. I think all around us is this kind of movement of people looking for something more natural to help. And they're finding it there. And again, wouldn't recommend that anybody do this without doing their research, just like you wouldn't take anything without doing your research. But there's a lot of opportunity for it. And I think we need to be open to what that could be.
Yeah, we'll shift gears after this, but I'm curious that does it impair you, like for driving or anything like that?
No, it does not impair you. So some of the stories that you'll hear from people saying, my cousin or whatever goes down and buys these shots of kratom. There are a lot of products that say kratom on them that might not actually be kratom, or they might be really high potency extracts and synthetic kratom and things like that will not be part of what's for sale in Mississippi, it looks like, after this legislative session. And so I think that's going to help a lot because anything that you take, if you take 4 times the amount you're supposed to, that's probably going to have an impact on you. But I think if we can help people make those distinctions between just taking a natural product and taking something that is really high potency and taking far too much of it, that's not good. But a lot of the people who are using kratom, another thing that they like about it is they generally never increase their dose if they're using it for health reasons. A lot of them, they've been taking it 6, 7, 8 years, and they take the same amount today that they took when they first started, which is not true with opioids. Your body does develop some tolerance to it, and you need higher and higher doses to get the same effect. Kratom doesn't appear to work that way, but we need a lot more research into it because we don't know how it interacts with lots of other medications or substances that people might take. So we don't need a ban. We need it to be regulated so we can research it and have consumers know even more about what its potential positives or negatives are.
But your points are well taken as it relates to, I mean, there are certain vitamins you can't take too much. You can take too much of. I take creatine. I don't know. Are you familiar with creatine? I take five grams of creatine every day. And it's because I work out weights and I've run, and it helps with recovery. And also, there's a lot of cognitive benefits from it that have been tested. That's probably one of the most tested supplements there is. But if you take too much of it, it could impact your kidney. So I have a kidney doctor who is on board with it, and then also my internal doctor is on board with it as well. But we're constantly aware of how's kidney function as it relates to no issues at all, and there's nothing in the studies that suggest there would be, especially if I don't have a pre-existing issue with it. But if I were to take 20 milligrams a day, it would be a problem. So
right. Which is Tylenol, ibuprofen, same thing.
Yeah,
you can't.
For sure.
Blow your liver out if you take too much of that.
There's no doubt about it. I can't help but think about as a society, we're becoming much more aware that for so long we put people in jail for smoking a joint. For addicts, people who really, instead of going to jail, should have been going to some kind of recovery center. We did that for so long. Do you find, though, that in today's society we're a lot more aware of that, and we're less tolerant to say we shouldn't take that approach? But I think you probably fight this every day. This is part of your calling, isn't it?
It is, but here's the interesting thing. So there is a general knowledge about that we have about marijuana. Most people would agree that people shouldn't be put in jail for having a joint. Certainly not everyone agrees with that, but for the majority of people, they have now shifted to that perspective. That's what statistics tell us. And yet we have kratom come on the scene, and we go right back to this knee-jerk reaction of like, oh, no, it should be banned. And so now there's about 30 different localities in Mississippi where not only is kratom banned from being sold, but if you are arrested, you can face up to 6 months in jail for it. So where I live in the capital city area, I won't call out my town, but they criminalized kratom about 6 months ago. And so now you not only can you not sell it here, but if I was to use it and be caught with it, I could be arrested and face multiple months in jail for it. And so I have a friend that has struggled with back pain for years and years and has a lot of trouble sleeping. So as I was learning about this and talking with all of these advocates and people who use it for their health, I said, hey, there's this kratom. A lot of people are using this for back pain. I don't know if you've heard of it. Might be worth looking into because this is a real struggle for him. And then about a week later, I found out that we had criminalized it here in my town, which he lives in the same town. And I said, never mind. I've just told you to go look out for something that you would be arrested for if you were caught with it. So now if you went 10 miles away, totally fine. The next town over, the next county over, you're going to be totally fine. That is... It's legal to do that. Is it helpful to do that? Is it helpful for anyone in Mississippi to be arrested and for taxpayers to pay for that whole process of a trial or plea and jail and whatever for people for possessing a botanical supplement? I do not think that is helpful. I think it's even worse than putting someone in jail for a joint because it has even less risk potential.
It kind of feels like the days of having dry counties, and having to come to grips with that on a county, city by city, county by county basis. When we come back on the other side, we'll continue our conversation with Christina Dent. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. I'm always fascinated to speak to Christina Dent, who has thought a lot about these issues. Somebody's got to think about them. Like when you're in the legislature, Christina is the founder and president of End It for Good in Mississippi. When you're at the legislature, what other organizations are like you that are trying to say, whoa, these choices that we're looking at now is a continuum. There's not a right or a wrong approach. Let's broaden the scope of our aperture a little bit and open our minds and understand how something like kratom, but not just kratom. We had the issue around medical marijuana, but how many other organizations like yours are focused on these specific issues?
Not many, although I don't spend most of my time is out in the community. So I spend some time up at the Capitol, but not as much. But one of the big problems with this, Ricky, is that it's very difficult for any of us to look outside of what directly impacts us and how it directly impacts us. So when you have something like Kratom, there's lots of different voices there. There's lots of different perspectives. And typically, people are trying to solve the problem that they or their particular group of people experience. So if law enforcement is feeling like they are seeing a lot of people using Kratom, they might think, hey, it would just be helpful if this stuff was gone. They might not be thinking about what's going to happen to the supply if it moves underground. It's going to become contaminated. That's going to be a massive public health problem. So we want to think about it from a big picture perspective, not just how do you keep it out of sight, but how do you actually solve the problems that come with substance use and decrease harm, not just in one area, but in lots of areas. If you think about even what we were talking about earlier with opioid prescribing. So if you only look at that data point of opioid prescribing, you would say, wow, we're doing amazing because opioid prescriptions are way down nationwide and here in Mississippi. But if you zoom out and look more broadly at the impact of that, overdose deaths have dramatically increased as opioid prescribing has decreased because people are moving to this contaminated underground market. So you can celebrate one thing as long as you don't look at the broader picture. And we really want to encourage people to step back, look at that broader picture and say, we can't celebrate victory if we have another harm that's happening one step over, that's even worse than the one that we were trying to fix. And that's a lot of what we do with drugs. We take this whack-a-mole approach. So first we ban one thing, then we try to crack down on the crime it creates, then we try to crack down on the contamination it creates, then we try to ban another thing, and then we got more contamination, we got more crime. And if we can step back from that and get out of our that reactionary position, we've all grown up being told, just be afraid of drugs. And what we know from the human brain is that when you are afraid, you cannot think and reason. You are in fight, flight, freeze. You are thinking about self-preservation. You're not rational. You cannot think logically when you're afraid. So we have basically been told, don't think about this. Don't really try to use your brain to solve the problems of drugs and addiction. Just be afraid of them. And that's not working for us. We have, about 17% of the American adult public struggles with an addiction. About 95% of those people could not access treatment, according to SAMHSA. And of even those who go to treatment, less than 50% complete treatment. So we've got all kinds of room for improvement. If we think that somehow we have gotten to the optimal, we have very few people getting treatment and very few people completing treatment. And then of those, the vast majority will relapse. So we need to be open to lots more pathways to recovery that could help more people find a path that they can stay on for recovery, and also open to looking at those root causes of the contamination that's causing overdose, of the underground market that is created this fentanyl crisis for us. And that's often not what we think it is. Gosh,
I need to I'm going to spend a little bit more time on the fentanyl crisis, although it comes up in lots of conversations. You and I have chatted about it, and law enforcement and I have talked about it, state leaders and I have talked about it, but why this conversation? Maybe you knew this going into it. Maybe you knew it when you wrote your book, Curious. Maybe you knew it when you founded this organization. The black market was often not considered in these data points that you were talking about, specifically around opioid, but it could be data points in other analysis as well. Maybe it didn't. Maybe it occurred to you then that the black market is so unpredictable and so unreliable and so damn dangerous that, man, we need to be having this conversation more, because the fentanyl crisis has brought this into like really serious focus now. How can anyone be assured that the illicit drug that they're going to take is anywhere near what they expect it to be? We're out of time, but I'll give you the last couple of seconds.
Yep, I'll just give you a preview. Almost 90% of drugs that are smuggled into the U.S. are smuggled at ports of entry. 90% of people convicted of trafficking are U.S. citizens. So even this idea of what's creating the fentanyl crisis, we got to dig deeper into that, because we can't solve fentanyl by just increasing border security or something like that. That's not the issue that we are dealing with. So deeper, keep going to the root, because that's how we're going to keep our kids safe and our families safe and our community safe.
Well, Christine, it's been terrific. I've enjoyed visiting with you. It's always eye-opening. It gets more eye-opening as we get more involved in these crises. But it's been a pleasure to spend some time with you. Thank you.
Thanks, Ricky.
This has been Christina Dent, from the founder and president of End It for Good in Mississippi. Another thoughtful conversation. Have a great day, and we will see you tomorrow.